All right, hi, we're back with the Chapter 11 practice problems, and we're going to finish the lecture where we left off so you can start to see how we're going to solve this problem. So again, an aggregate plan through the spreadsheet process is effectively a trial and error technique. You are going to try one method of regular output versus overtime output versus subcontracting, or some combination thereof, and see which one of those combinations, possible policy changes, possible various sources of different costs, to see what comes up to be the cheapest cost, and that's the one you pick. So the alternatives are compared based on their total cost. The disadvantage is that it does not necessarily result in the optimal aggregate plan. That's because you're through trial and error, you're attempting what you can conceive of. There are things like like linear programming, where it will arrive at an optimal solution given a series of constraints. Those of you who have taken quant methods or business decision analysis in the past are going to be familiar with those concepts. You just may not think of, you may not find it. You may not find the optimal aggregate plan, the lowest possible cost, because it's just going to be the lowest cost of what you have worked on. That's what your choice is going to end up being. So when you do that, you end up with a spreadsheet that looks like an Excel spreadsheet, like most spreadsheets look. And in that, you're going to have this is 6 periods. For some reason, the number 6 is missing there. But there's 6 periods here of forecasted demand, however much output we have, meaning what's our level of production for each period and our total production, through various sources, through regular, what they call regular time, meaning your regular workers, overtime, paying your regular workers overtime. Subcontracting is hiring an outside company or workers to come in and produce additional supply for you. And then figuring out how much inventory you have at the beginning of the period, ending of the period, and then the average of those two is what you're going to base your inventory cost on. And you're going to see it through this exercise. Typically, carrying inventory is a tremendous cost. The activity that we're going to do this week on our actual problems for the problem set show that inventory is a tremendous cost. This problem in the spreadsheet, the other costs are higher on this example, but usually holding inventory can be very expensive depending on the product that you're making. Once you figure out all of your costs, you then arrive at the total cost. And again, with aggregate planning, you're concerned with the total cost, not cost for overtime, not cost for subcontracting, because at the end of the day, it's about the total cost. You've aggregated all of your items you produce into an item cost per unit, even though you make different products. You've aggregated all of your overtime costs into one cost, even though your workers might make various amounts of hourly pay, et cetera, right? You're aggregating everything to make it appear as that you have one type of worker and one type of output of products. So we're not concerned with individual costs. We're worried about the total cost only, and that's what we'll compare. And again, to recap, alternatives is just different choices you can make. There's not a main choice and then an alternative choice, like we might think of that word alternative being different than the norm in some way. In business theory, decision theory, alternative is just one option. So a list of 3 alternatives are equally possible to be the right one until you arrive at the conclusion of which of those should be selected. We covered that in chapter 5. So this example, for that top line for the forecasting, we're going to see that we've got forecast for 6 periods: 200, 200, 300, 400, 500, 200. So you have an amount forecasted for each of those 6 periods, totaling up to 1,800. And the company makes skateboards, and they're going to make an aggregate plan that'll cover 6 periods. They want steady rate of regular output, meaning they're going to produce the exact same amount every month. And then The months where they make too much or too little, they're going to have some backlog if necessary, but otherwise they'll just carry excess inventory. We're not going to allow overtime or subcontracting in this example. In your problem set, you're going to be told whether or not overtime and subcontracting are allowed, and they differ on the different times. You're going to be doing the same type of problem 3 times with 3 different methods on that problem set. And you'll be told whether or not overtime is allowed, how many hours of overtime or how many units of production of overtime you allow, how much can be subcontracted out, etc. So this policy is in place. Overtime and subcontract are not used because they're going to have steady output and they have enough capacity to handle it. They're going to have 0 inventory on hand in the first period. All of our costs are given right here in the middle. Right here, all of our costs are given, and then no inventory to start. So the top half of our spreadsheet is going to be basically everything to do with the units, inventory, and production. So everything to do with units, and the bottom half is going to be everything to do with cost. So we start by knowing that what our forecast is for each period, and then our total forecast for the 6 months is 1,800 units. Well, if we have the capacity to handle that, and we're doing a level of production for all 6 months, then you would divide 1,800 by 6 for the 6 periods, and then that tells you we're going to have 300 units produced every month. So far, so good. Now, you'll notice that your regular time, overtime, subcontract are slightly to the right. They're indented under output because those are every possible way that you could output units of production are going to go under this output section. They're going to be broken down by how they're made because there are costs associated that differ based on how they're produced, but they're all output. And then you have everything to do with your inventory below that. And so what we'll see is that we have 300 units of regular output, no overtime, no subcontract, and that's true every single period. Your output minus forecast is all of your output minus your forecast. So if we had overtime or we had subcontract, we would say regular plus overtime plus subcontract minus forecast. That would be our output minus forecast for that period. So we have 300 units that we made. We used 200 units. The output minus forecast is 100. And we're going to do this all the way down to the end. This is nothing to do with your starting inventory or carrying inventory. This is just that period's contribution to how many units I'm going to have in inventory. So do this line first. Inventory is going to be done period by period, but this one's going to be done all the way down before we get to our inventory. So output minus forecast, 300 minus 200 is 100. 300 minus 200 is 100. 300 minus 300 is 0. 300 minus 400, we're at negative 100. So we're going to have a negative contribution to inventory this period. 300 minus 500 is negative 200. And then this final month, 300 minus 200 is 100. So you're going to write that down each month or calculate each month. If you're doing it by hand, for the quiz or for later on in the exam, you'll just have to write these numbers down as you go and as you find them. But the total output minus forecast, you'll see by the end, because you're making 300 a period for 6 periods, it's going to add to 1,800. So by the end, this is going to wash. This is going to wash to 0 with the production. Eventually, through some method, this is going to be 0. Now, initially, if you're not sure how much overtime to use each period or how much to subcontract out each period, until you add that into the equation, this might be some other number because you haven't made enough output yet. But once you've gotten all of this correct, as far as how much additional production you need, this should come out to 0. So 100 plus 100 is 200, minus 100 is 100, minus 200 is negative 100, plus 100, you're back to 0 again. So it comes out. Now, the next section, we have to work down the column of each period until we get to the average inventory, and actually until we get to backlog. So backlog is what happens when you don't have enough inventory through all of your sources to cover all of your orders, all of your demand. So you have a backlog. You have, I've got to get this money to not money. I've got to get this product to the customer. next period, or as soon as we can finally catch up. We owe them money. I say money again. We owe them product because we've taken their money. We've got to get that product to them, and we got to cover that before we cover, you know, the next shipments out. They're the next ones to get units of whatever it is we're selling, skateboards in this case, before the next period worth of orders come in. So we started with 0 in inventory. We ended with 100. Why did we end with 100? Because our contribution for that period was plus 100. So we're going to have beginning inventory plus this value is what we're going to end with. I started with 0. I added 100. I've got 100. The average inventory is going to be the average of your beginning and ending. So this number plus this number divided by 2, or in Excel, you can do an equals average. If some of this isn't making sense with the way I'm formulating, I'm going to solve this in Excel for you guys and actually work through it in Excel. But I want to show you the methodology one time first before we go through the actual math of it with calculator and with Excel. So backlog only occurs if my ending inventory would be negative. If that happens, then I'm going to move the negative value into a positive number under backlog. So let's go through each month. I end the period with 100. Whatever you end with each period, you're going to start the next period with. I ended with 100. I'm going to start with 100. You can see I'm going to end with 200. I'm going to start with 200. End with 200. Start with 200. End with 100. Start with 100. So as you progress down this, you'll see in all cases your beginning inventory each period is what you ended the last period with. Not your average inventory. That's different. That's for calculating costs. So ended with 100. I'm going to start with 100. Now I start with 100. I've got 100 left over of production, extra production this month. So I add my 100 new extra units to my existing 100. I end with 200. Okay, it averages out to 150 because that's the average of 1 and 200. Okay, 200 is what I ended with. I'm going to start with 200. I don't add anything more. I've made exactly the amount of production this month to cover this month. So I started with 200. I add nothing to it. I end with 200. Copy this 200 to here. Now I start with 200 and I'm 100 short. So to cover this 100 short that I'm at, I've got to take it from my existing inventory. So I had 200. I'm going to use 100 of it to cover the demand for that period. So I'm going to subtract 100 and I'm going to end with 100. I'm going to end the month finally with less than I started with. Okay. Copy the 100 over. Anytime that I end a period with inventory, I carry it over to the start of the next period. Now in this period, we end up with something a little bit different because I start with 100 and I'm 200 short this month. So I have to use 100 of it. So I would finish negative 100 inventory. Can't happen. You're not allowed to ever have a negative value in ending inventory. Anything negative under ending inventory has to be moved to backlog if backlog is allowed. If backlog's not allowed, then you have to find a way to produce enough units, pay overtime that period or subcontract out that period, hire workers that period. You have to cover it in order to make sure that your ending inventory is not negative. And if backlog's not allowed, you can't move it to backlog either. But in this case, backlog is allowed in this example. In your problem set, I don't recall, I believe backlog might not be allowed in that problem set. So you'll have to check on that. Okay, so I start with 100. I'm 200 short. So I use the 100. And then the other 100, I zero out here and I move that negative 100 into 100 positive backlog. So I've got 100 orders to fill. Now, next period, I made 300. I only needed 200. So 300 minus 200 is 100. I started with nothing. So now the first thing I have to do, because I'm going to, even though I start with 0, I made 100 extra. I need to look, do I have anything in my backlog? I've got 100 backlog to take care of. So to find my ending inventory for this period, I have to take my output minus forecast, this value 100, add it to my inventory. So beginning plus this minus my backlog. So now I've used this 100, so I'm going to end the period once again with 0. At the conclusion of all that, I don't care about the total for beginning. I don't care about the total for ending. I only care about the total for average inventory because your inventory costs are based on average inventory. The inventory turnover ratio and all the inventory ratios from your finance class will make you remember that that where we care about average inventory when it comes to allocating inventory costs. So we care about the total for average inventory and we care about the total for backlog because those two things have a cost associated with them. Now let's look at our costs. I'm going to go back a slide. We can see regular time is going to cost us $2 a skateboard. Overtime is $3 a skateboard. Subcontracting is $6. Inventory is $1. And back orders are huge at $5. All right. So we've got regular time at 600 per period because it's 300 units of production times $2 a skateboard. That's 600 every period. Total cost 3,600. No overtime, no subcontract, no hiring, firing. Inventory cost. Average inventory times $1. So every time I carry extra inventory, I have it left over, it's costing me $1 per average inventory. And you can see I've got 50 units average inventory right here, 50 units times $1, $50, and so on, all the way down. And we see our total cost just for having the excess inventory on hand is $600 for the period. That's the same amount as it costs us to produce an entire month's worth of items. Huge cost. So even that's $1 per unit, it adds up quick, right? So, I mean, it increases the cost by 50%. It costs us $2 to make it, now an extra $1 just to hold on to it. Backlog, 1 month of backlog, 100 units, we were behind, $5 a unit, $500. So 100 units that we didn't cover cost us $500. We probably would have been way better off paying overtime that period. And then we calculate our total cost. So you total up each column's worth of cost, 650 equals 650, and so on, and then total it across at the end. And when it's all said and done, we care about this value right here, 4,700, the total cost. That's the big one. All right, I'm going to switch over to Excel now. All right, so we've got 2 practice problems we're going to go through, and yes, you probably noticed on the time, this is going to be a little bit longer of a video than normal because I want to show you all the ways you can calculate this, plenty of different options. Your quiz only has 1 question of this. The exam you're going to take later on, you're going to want to revisit your problem set just to be very familiar with it because there's going to be several questions that are similar to what you're going to do in your problem set. Some of you like to take your quiz before your problem set, so I've only got the 1 question on there on it this week, but yeah, you definitely want to take your time with this. There's going to be, I'll show you a couple complicated formulas. You don't have to use them to get full credit, and some of you just won't want to attempt those formulas. For those of you who are feeling more comfortable in Excel, please do attempt them. They are logic tests that will help you calculate it without having to do each one by one. It'll let you do your work a lot faster. Once we do it once for the second period, we can copy it all the way down, and that's great. For those of you who don't want to attempt that, a little bit shy around Excel still or not as comfortable, you can do it column by column as well. So let's look at this problem. We've got aggregate plan for 9 months, forecast for every period. Demand is relatively high in periods 3 and 4, and then again in 8. We've got 20 employees and, pardon me 1 second. 20 employees, each of whom produces 10 units of output per period at $6 a unit. We started with no inventory. Inventory carrying cost is $5 per unit per period. Backlog is $10 per unit. Will we have enough workforce to handle the forecast? Figure out the total cost of the plan, including all the production, inventory, and back order cost. All right, so in this one, I've copied these values over. Let's start just on this line here. I've copied the forecast over, and where did I get this 200 from? It says that we have 20 full-timers who have 10 units apiece. 20 times 10 is 200. Okay, so they're producing 200 every period. Our costs are $6 per unit for regular time, $5 for inventory, $10 for back orders, and that should be all we need. Will we have enough to handle production and then determine the total cost? All right, let's get rid of that. And now we know our total regular time. But will we have enough? Well, 9 times 200 is 1800, so no. Well, we won't, will we? So equals the sum of these 9 periods. On this far right side, we want the sum of each row all the way down. So I'm going to hit Control C, and then I'm just going to highlight all of these and hit Control V right away. Some of them are going to be zeros. Some of them are going to give an error because it's saying we omitted this, or we skipped these empty lines. That's fine. Let's highlight them all and just ignore the error. All right. We want that right off the bat. We want the total of each row all the way down. Great. We want it here too, but I don't want to change the color, so I actually already had it written there. I would probably just write equals sum again. You could paste it into that, and then just change the color back to yellow so that it's highlighted yellow. Either way, but you do want an equal sum at the end of each row that's in use. Don't do it on this blank row in the middle or any of the rows that are blacked out. Overtime, subcontracting. There is none on this problem, right? Yeah, no overtime, no subcontracting allowed. So those are all going to be zeros. Because they're zeros, you could put them in there. Not required though. You could just leave them all blank. I'll just put them in there to show you there's no overtime, no subcontracting. Okay, now our output minus forecast. This is any output, regular, overtime, subcontracting, whatever our output possibilities are. All of these values minus forecast. Forecast is just this value right here. Okay. So I'm going to do equals this plus this plus this minus this. Keep it easy. Output minus forecast, to do it one time, copy it all the way down to the end. Done. Nothing special there. Are we going to be short? Yeah, we're going to be short 140 units. So our workforce is not enough to carry it. We would have to go back and either carry the backlog, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, or we want to go back to our director, operations director, or somebody in charge and say, hey, we need to lift the overtime cap this period and make some more during these heavy production periods. Okay, ending inventory. So my ending inventory for my my first period, because I definitely have no backlog going in, and I definitely have no well, I guess we could just do it right away because the backlog spots in. Let's just start with a complicated formula right out of the gates. Okay, so with ending inventory, what we want from this ending inventory is that if my output minus forecast minus my backlog is a negative number, we wanted to just show 0 ending inventory. And then we're going to make another formula under backlog that will show the positive number there. What I mean by that is anytime my ending inventory would be negative, I do not want it to show a negative number. I only wanted to show positive numbers. So if this number minus this number is a positive number, and 10 minus 0 is a positive number, it's going to show 10. However, in this cell right here, negative 30 minus my backlog of 0 is a negative number. I do not want it to show negative 30. Instead, I wanted to show 0 because I cannot start with, excuse me, cannot start with, or I cannot end the period with a negative number. I can't have negative inventory. I either have inventory or I don't. So then my backlog is where I wanted to show whatever value this negative number would be. I wanted to show here instead. So how do I write this complicated formula, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write here equals if, and it is if. All right, let's try this. If output minus forecast minus backlog, which it's an empty spot right here, but I'm going to write it one time and copy it all the way down. If that value is greater than 0, then I wanted to show that number. If that number is a positive number, I wanted to show the number. So if this minus my backlog, I'm missing something here. I think I'm missing. beginning inventory here. I am. If optimize forecast. Yes, I'm missing beginning inventory in the formula. Here we go. So if beginning inventory plus optimize forecast minus backlog. I was missing something here. All right, so if the amount, the 10, the excess amount I have plus whatever inventory I had left over minus the backlog, if that value is greater than 0, I think I need 2 parentheses here. I do. If I wasn't so long into the tape, I would probably start over. All right, if we want everything in the if, so we're going to start with a second set of parentheses. So if, here we go, beginning inventory plus output minus forecast minus backlog. If that value is greater than 0, then I want it to show that value. So the first thing is going to be value of true is going to be beginning inventory plus output minus forecast minus backlog. Otherwise, show me a 0. Okay. Nope, I need to close my second parentheses. Yes. So ending inventory is 10. I ended with 10 extra units of production. I'm going to begin the period with 0. 10 and 0 is 10. Great. What does that average out to? Equals average of these two. Backlog. Okay. Backlog, I can also write a formula for. So it's going to be the exact same thing to start with. So equals if, open the second set of parentheses, if my beginning inventory plus output minus forecast minus backlog, which is E14, if that is less than 0, I don't want it to show 0. Instead, I want it to show the absolute value of that number, meaning if that's negative 10, I want it to show 10 here because I would end with negative 10. I want to move that into my backlog as a positive 10. I'm showing you the complicated Excel version, and then I'm going to show you how to do it by hand instead here. All right. So value of true, I want it to show the absolute value of beginning inventory plus output minus forecast minus backlog. Otherwise, show me 0. Close my parentheses, enter. See if it works. So if I've done this correctly, let's do one more thing. I'm going to copy equals ending inventory. So I'm always going to start the next period with what I ended with. I should be able to then copy this all the way down. Copy this all the way down. Ooh, we've got something cooking. Copy this all the way down. And copy backlog all the way down. Yeah, we did it. Check your book. Complicated formula. We wrote it one time and then we're done. So that's pretty nice. Regular output is going to be, now we're on our costs. Our costs are going to be equal to our regular output times our regular output cost. Overtime output times overtime output cost. There's not any in this case, same with subcontracting, but it would be this times this all the way through. Hiring, firing workers all the way through. Inventory cost, $5 times the average inventory each period, $10 times the back order each period. So this one's going to be just a simple multiplication. Regular time, lock it in, times regular time for that period. Inventory, lock it in, times average inventory for that period. Back orders, lock it in, times backlog for that period. All right, let's just copy all of these all the way down. Blam, all the way down. Correctamundo. Now let's just total our costs at the bottom. So equals sum of the cost for that period. All the way down, 20,550. So you can see how if we do a complicated formula one time with this if statement and work through it logically, you can copy it all the way down. So hopefully give that a try. Now, let's say you're not feeling great about the if statement. Well, I can just do this manually. Okay, I could say ending inventory is equal to what I started with plus what I added to it. Okay, backlog. Anytime that I do that and I'm going to end with a negative number, I'm going to move it to my backlog instead. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I did this one instead. I ended with 10, so I copied 10, so I'm going to go equals 10. Okay, I'm going to do the simple version of this. Ending inventory is going to be equal to what I added to it plus what I started with, negative 20. Anytime you see a negative 20, I just want you to type 0. And then here, you're going to do equals absolute value of this number minus this number plus this number. So whatever formula you would have done in the ending inventory, as soon as you see that it's negative number, type a 0 instead. Do the same formula here, but with an absolute value at the start of it. Okay, it'll still come out to 20. So again, I'm doing it month by month because I feel comfortable with it, and that's fine. And I'm not gonna force you to do a equals if statement. Not everybody's gonna be comfortable with that. So equals my contribution this month plus my beginning inventory. It's a negative number. As soon as I see that, type 0. Do the exact same thing here. Equals absolute value of this plus this. Okay. And anytime you see a negative number, do that same thing. And unfortunately, because of this problem, you've got backlog every month. You have to do that every single period. But if you're more comfortable with it, great. This equals average is still going to be an equals average all the way down, though. But hopefully, you give this the if statement a chance, because, like I was saying, if you can write it one time and get it right, you can copy it all the way down. You don't have to lock in any cells with that. Let's look at one more problem. Similar type of problem. This one, you've got seasonal workers. So you have a forecast of varying amount, but period 4 and period 3, you've got more than 1,200 a month. So this one, we want to do level production every period, but for periods 3 and 4, we've got to hire 2 extra workers. We will train them in period 3. And then they'll actually be able to work off the extra backlog and all of the extra production in period 4. They cost more money because they're not as good, and so the output rate's lower, so their cost per unit aggregated and allocated is going to be higher. But let's look at how this would break down. So we've got $50 per worker to hire them, nothing to let them go afterwards, but it's processing fee of some kind, sure. And then we've got $4 a unit for the regular production, $5 a unit for producing it from the seasonal workers, and backlog costs $1. All right, so our regular production we know is level. We were told that it's $1,200 a month. So $1,200 a month. So far we're at $9,600. You can see our 2,000 units shy, 11,600 minus 96. Okay. We know that this final row is always going to be just the sum of the row. So I can copy that formula all the way down. Okay, I copied that. Let me change it back to yellow. Ignore all these errors. It's just finding these values and saying, hey, you forgot about these numbers. Are you sure? Yeah, ignore it. Okay. Part-time workers. So part-time workers, I can produce units with them, but I can only do it. I've got to hire them in the 3rd period, and they can make the products in the 4th period. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know how much they're going to produce yet. I guess it's going to be the entire 2,000 here, right? So I guess I could write 2,000 here. I don't think it said that in the word problem, the exact value. But what I can do is I can do my output minus forecast to see how much I'm short. So this is going to be equal to all my production. So this plus this plus this plus this minus forecast. All my output minus my forecast. Copy this all the way down. And I can see I'm 2,000 short. I can only use them here. So once I know that the value is 2,000, I know that I'm gonna make 2,000 units here. So they're not available. Ideally, I would love to make 200 extra units here and not have backlog, and not but seems unavoidable because I have to train them for a month and then they make 2,000 units one time and then I'm caught up. So that's fine. Beginning inventory is always going to be equal to last period's ending. So I can just write that right now, equals catty corner down that value, copy that all the way down. As I fill this in, it will correct itself. Ending value. So let's go through that equals if statement again. Let's say I'm not using equals if. My ending value is going to be equal to output minus forecast plus beginning, right? If this is a negative number, turn it into a 0 and then do equals ABS, this plus this, right? That's how you would do it with without doing a equals if statement. How you do it by hand? Well, you would just do output minus forecast plus beginning equals ending. Okay. So the quiz question, I mean, that's really all there is to it. Doing it by hand. Average, you would just do beginning plus ending equals average, right? Backlog would be equal to, the value of ending. If ending was negative, you just turn it into a value of backlog. Otherwise, it's 0. Regular production, you're just doing $4 times this, $5 times this, etc. Okay, so let's keep working on it. I'm going to do the equals if statement again. So equals if output minus forecast plus what I have in inventory minus what I've got to cover in backlogs is greater than 0. Then show me exactly that. Show me what output minus forecast plus, oops, I need to open parentheses. Output minus forecast plus beginning inventory minus backlog. Otherwise, show me a 0. Okay. What did I do? G10 plus G12 minus F15. Close my parentheses. Oh, okay. I didn't have my second set of parentheses open to start. There we go. Copy this all the way down. And you can see I do have, right now, until I fix it, I've got, till this fixes itself, I've got 200 units here too much. But once I factor in my backlog here, that's going to go away. So formula is good. Equals average of this. Backlog. Also going to be an equals if statement. If the same value we did earlier, second set of parentheses, beginning inventory, or rather output minus forecast plus beginning inventory minus backlog is less than 0, then show me the absolute value of that number. Basically, show me what I would have put into ending inventory if it came up with a negative number. So this number plus this number minus 15. Otherwise, show me nothing under backlog. Okay, do that one time. After that formula looks like, pause your screen and recreate it. Copy that all the way down. Copy this all the way down. Formula updates itself. One period we have backlog, 200 units of backlog. I make an extra 200 here, so I cover everything I needed. plus the extra 200 left over covers the backlog, and I'm back to zero for the rest of the periods. So I only pay backlog one time. I pay part-time workers one time. Not so bad. All right, now all the way down, hire and fire workers. So at what point do I hire or fire workers? I have to account for that. So what I'm going to do here is, it's not really a good spot for me to put the number of workers hired or fired anywhere. So I'm just going to cover this one real quick and say, because we're told in the board problem, we're gonna hire them in March to be ready for the fourth period. I'm going to do equals 50 times 2. I'm just going to write it in. Your real problem doesn't have anything about hiring, firing, so you won't have to worry about that. $50 to hire 2 people, $100 allocated to March. All right, now let's go back to the rest of them. So equals, we've got $4, lock it in, times regular production. We've got $5, lock it in, times part-time production. We've got inventory, lock it in, times average inventory cost. And we've got back orders, lock it in, times number of units in backlog. Copy these all the way down. Oops. Okay. Copy these all the way down. Great. All the way good there. And then some of these all the way down. And we're done as well. 48,700. Check your book. I think a book agrees. So that's that. If you have questions, please email me on this one, especially if you're trying the if statement and it's not working for whatever reason. And I want you to get that right if you want to attempt it. It's very handy in business. And then again, for your practice problem, you're going to have 3 different types of methods and policies to experiment with, and you're trying to figure out which of the 3 alternatives is the lowest cost. So you're going to do the same thing 3 times. Now, hint, if you set it up right the first time, most of these things can actually be copied and pasted to the next one and to the next one to the next one, especially these equals ifs. If you do that right here, you can just copy this entire section to the second one, the third one, because it's referring to cells that are in the exact same locations. You're not locked, you don't have anything locked in. Even these ones you could, but the problem is it's going to be referring to a locked in cell above, so it may or may not copy correctly. You might have to recreate just this one in this first row and copy it down. But pay attention to whether or not backlogs are allowed. I think they're not allowed on any of them. Pay attention to how much overtime is allowed, how many units of overtime per month, because that changes between the 3 of them. That goes back and forth from, I think, 15 to 10. So check that very, very closely. And same thing with subcontracting. You can subcontract on one of them and not the other ones, I think. So just check out what is allowed and what isn't allowed. There's some ambiguity in the book. I've tried to clarify that on the Excel spreadsheet for you. All right, so that's it. Again, I know it was a longer one. Thanks for sticking with us. It'll be shorter next period, next chapter. Thanks, everyone.